today, even in front of the White House. Julie Banderas is joining us live from our New York City newsroom with more on that. And Julie, you were out at the UN for a large part of the day today.
Yeah, and a peaceful protest. It's really a rally, if you will. Obviously a protest, nothing compared to Egypt. The people there, though, inside Egypt will not hear or see the rallies, and that is because of the government-imposed media blackout. Tens of thousands of protesters, though, here in the United States, peacefully coming out in droves over this weekend, and their voices have been heard. In fact, today at the United Nations, some 1,500 people showed up. They gathered outside, other rallies taking place in dozens of cities across the country and in Canada today. This movement is led by the Egyptian Association for Change. It demands an end to corruption, unemployment, poverty, and torture. The rally at the UN, although peaceful, filled with anxiety, though, and frustration over the corrupt government in Egypt and the ruthless killings that we've been witnessing on live television, and they are demanding a change in power. Meantime, people also gathering in the nation's capital, in front of the White House today and yesterday, demanding an end to the brutality by the Egyptian National Police. They are begging, and I say begging because they begged me to report this, that President Obama needs to step in and halt aid to Egypt. Aid, demonstrators say, is arming those police and military to turn on its own people. And more of the same in Chicago as the violence continues in Egypt, with the death toll rising to over 70 people killed, at least 2,000 hurt, more than 1,000 detained in what started off as peaceful protests, but as seen by the disturbing and violent video images coming out of Egypt, peace is nowhere in sight. Protesters being met with brutal force, riot police in helmets and shields seen charging the crowds, beating people with batons, and plainclothes police beating demonstrators with long sticks and firing off rubber bullets. And I also want to mention the internet shutdown. People I spoke with today say there's no way for them to communicate via Facebook. However, people from Egypt here in the country are communicating that way, and it in fact was Facebook that allowed all of these rallies to take place today. And I just want to quote one woman who wrote and posted on Facebook today, which really says it all. And I'm quoting, "Here I am in the U.S. and I have no idea how my parents, family, and friends are doing. I can't reach any of them. Landlines and cell phones are down, and I keep hearing about the robberies and attacks. I need to make my people's pain heard. I need to stand up for them here. I'll do everything in my power. My country is falling apart. My people are falling apart. I won't let them down." Rick.
Pretty heavy stuff. Julie Banderas in the newsroom. Julie, thanks.
Sure.
Wow. Egyptian dissident and Nobel Peace Laureate Mohammed al-Baradei is calling for Mubarak to step down, and he's blaming the U.S. for not taking a tougher stance. The former head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog group is seen as a possible replacement for Mubarak and joined protesters Friday before being put under house arrest. Al-Baradei saying Mubarak's speech to his nation yesterday was disappointing and showed he did not understand the message of the Egyptian people. Al-Baradei also said the U.S. must choose between supporting Mubarak's government or the Egyptian people.
Another group that could have a major influence in a power grab if the Mubarak government collapses is another group called the Muslim Brotherhood. And today a member of the Muslim Brotherhood spoke out and said that Islamist rule in Egypt would pose no threat to the West because it would be more democratic than President Hosni Mubarak's dictatorship. Here is some background on this group. They are Egypt's largest and best organized opposition group. The Muslim Brotherhood is said to have inspired two of the world's most dangerous terror organizations, Hamas and Al-Qaeda, but the group, which is considered the father of Al-Qaeda, is not on the U.S. State Department's list of terror organizations. But the State Department does classify the group as an illegal organization and not a legitimate political group.
So let's talk a little bit more about this group and about the impact, what impact the chaos in Egypt could have on the Muslim world as a whole. Let's bring in Michael Singh, the former Senior Director of Middle East Affairs at the National Security Council. Good to have you here, sir.
Hi, Juliet.
I was talking with our makeup artist before I came in here, and I said that I would be talking with you about the Brotherhood, and she said, well, I thought, wait a second, I thought this was, the protests were about reform. So let's talk just generally, who are the protesters generally, and what do they want?
Well, the protesters, I think, originally were largely youth who weren't organized by any political party, but who were inspired by the events in Tunisia to sort of lose a little bit of their fear of the state and come out into the streets. And they organized themselves by Twitter and by other social media. The Muslim Brotherhood wasn't really involved, and in fact specifically chose not to participate in the protests, probably out of fear of what the government response would be, and it's really been playing catch-up. And now only, I think yesterday, did they really joined in the protests.
A lot of folks had never even really heard of the Muslim Brotherhood until now, but you probably would know in other names, different factions, for instance, Hamas in Palestine. Tell us a little bit about this organization. What are their aims? What are their goals?
Well, it's an old organization. It's deeply rooted in Egyptian politics. It started in about the 1920s, and it's gone through very different phases.
Hey, Tom!
Did engage in military
I got a question for
activity,
you.
Right.
but these days is mainly a political organization and a charitable organization. It is, in fact, it's illegal in Egypt, and yet it's
just a quick one.
largest opposition
Do you want some champagne? That wasn't my question.
Failures of the Mubarak regime, that they haven't opened up political space for secular, liberal opposition parties, and so something like the Muslim Brotherhood is the only legitimate opposition. Even though they're illegal, they won 20% of the seats in Parliament in 2005. That went way down in 2010 because they boycotted the elections after the government essentially repressed them. But their aims are really not clear. They do oppose Egypt's peace with Israel. They are anti-American, but they're not really sponsoring violence. In fact, Al Qaeda has denounced the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood for not being more violently opposed to the regime or to the West.
You answered my next question about what the attitude is towards the West. The group slogan is Islam is the solution. So, of course, that begs the question, well, then what is the attitude towards the West? The leader of the Muslim Brotherhood says this unrest that we're seeing here is essentially basically just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg. Soon it will spread across the Mideast. Soon we will see the Arab leaders who are friendly with the United States, with Israel. They will go through the same thing Mubarak is going through. Do you believe he's right?
Well, Egypt has always been considered sort of the symbolic center of the Arab world. And while I don't think it was inevitable that Tunisia would necessarily spark a wave of protests across the region, I think that is true of Egypt. And so if Mubarak falls, I do think we could see this spread across the Arab world. We have seen protests in Jordan, for example, significant protests, as well as Yemen and other places. Jordan has its own branch of the Muslim Brotherhood called the Islamic Action Front. Now, they're not illegal in Jordan. They are the biggest opposition party in Jordan.
Yeah.
And again, they're also sort of anti-Israel. Jordan.
Oh, another hatch. I didn't see that one. Thanks.
They're anti-American. And so if you started to see a movement in that direction in Jordan, which I think is less likely for other reasons, you would again see this kind of anti-Americanism probably take hold.
Yeah.
Something that's quite interesting, in fact, is that the Iranians, for themselves, obviously, they have their own opposition to the movement. They're themselves as private the protesters. It says that the protesters are not so much democratic movements as much as they are anti-secular, anti-Western. But with the regime saying that they're all part of the Western bloc, that gives you a sense that the regional dynamics behind this.
But the answer is have all these different forces kind of going at each other. I mean, on the 25th of January, something called and it has been quite different documents essentially about renewing Islam towards modernity, sort of pushing it towards the 21st century. Some of the areas of fulfillment they're talking about Islam redefining the concept of jihad, separating spiritual state, secularism, is talking about. Are you exactly sort of saying that Western revolution, reform, anti-West, anti-Israel, all kind of coming together at one time?
Well, I think that's right. And this is something that has been going on in other communities around the world. And to me, the point of the United States, and the real key policy issue is we need to, the goal should not be that we have violent enough people in all these countries, but that there is political space in these countries so that the business political parties so that these discussions are based and have out the open rather than behind closed doors. Because when it's in the dark, behind closed doors, that gives the advantage of ignoring the extremists. We want to be open, we want to be
Out 51! Out 51! Out 51!
Groups like Al Qaeda could take.
Who is the hippie
remember
mob?
that the sort of intellectual.
Who is the mad Mahdi? I'll hack 51. I'll hack 51. I'll hack 51. I'll hack 51.
I think the answer there would be hard to know how it's going to turn out. If you remember in 2005, when Secretary of State Conrad arrived at the space meeting, where she sort of said that we had tried to favor stability over democracy, and we got neither one. And so the Bush administration pushed very hard for democracy, movements towards democracy in these countries. To the extent that's been neglected, I think we've gotten ourselves into a tight spot where we don't have the opening of political space, where now we're just reacting to a crisis. And so we're worse off, I think, than we would have been if we had consistently followed a policy of pushing for democracy. And so this could turn out well for the Egyptian people of the United States, but it could also go the other direction. And that uncertainty, I think, is what the White House is really grappling with now.
All right, I'm just saying thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Well, tomorrow on Fox News Sunday and this fall, U.S. response to it. And a Fox News exclusive, which will also be again, that's on Fox News Sunday tomorrow morning. Check your local listings for the time.
All righty, well, protesters still get face-to-face culverts, all separated by barbed wire. That protest is not like the outbreak that has been Ali after 23 years in power.
With the latest blast of snow just a couple of days ago, a slushy mess still out in front of people's houses. Chief meteorologist Rick Wright is tracking it all at the Fox Weather Center. No more, Rick.
Here's
what I'm going to say. We are 20 inches away tonight. That's not a big deal, but it might break maybe a half an inch or an inch or so in a few spots. Then we turn all of our attention out to this storm here. You can see it wound up here off across the Pacific. That's what's going to pull in here to California. It's changing conditions in California. We've seen a lot of dry conditions, and we've also been seeing temps extremely warm. It's going to cool things down, bring in some rain, and then we're going to be watching a big storm, guys, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Now trying to protect their national heritage as looters break into the Egyptian Museum, threatening King Tut and other irreplaceable treasures. We're going to tell you about that.
Plus, it sounds like science and genetics. Why?